Hello, my beloved listeners. It's that time again. Time to delve into the mechanics of how society is changing in America, and not necessarily in a good way. I am Charles Wells, and if you haven't sat down with me before, you have stumbled onto another episode of The Patriot Preacher, a channel where we sift through the craziness of life in our dear America in an attempt to comprehend the incomprehensible, to derive logic from the illogical, and to generally make the attempts to parse out and ultimately carve out the core of what it means to be a 21st century American. Today, my fellow lovers of the truth, we will deal with a mythical category of human behavior known as toxic masculinity. This term was basically coined by hardcore feminists and then went on to be embraced by the entirety of a generation of social justice warriors. Now, I think that I am particularly qualified to talk about this category of humans because there's no doubt in my mind that they would place me firmly in the category of a toxically masculine male. After all, look at me. Shaved head, the goatee, a cap with the American flag on it, a wooden American flag behind me, and a carved representation of the Bible and a sword on it in front of me. If that's not symbolically what a toxically masculine figure would look like, I'm not sure what it would be. But think about that for a moment. I shaved my head because I'm bald and I would look silly with little gray puffs of curly hair on the sides of my head. If I were to let my hair grow out, it would make me look like Bozo the Clown in his later years. I served in the military, so I proudly sported an American flag on my cap. Veterans made the wooden flag behind me, and it represents my sincere appreciation for all their sacrifices for my freedoms and the freedoms of my family. I'm a Christian man who believes you should love others as Christ loves you. Therefore, I decorated the front of my desk with a representation of what the ultimate truth is, which is the Bible. Now, I would agree that at least part of the image I have constructed might be construed in some ways masculine. But I would love to know how any of this is in the least bit toxic. And you see, folks, that's the issue, isn't it? Coining a phrase that is supposed to characterize an entire group of people and then using it against them to in some way gain something for yourself or to take something away from them is both self-serving, sexist, and not to mention purely subjective. What is toxic masculinity anyway? Well, it is briefly defined as a set of attitudes and ways of behaving stereotypically associated with what is expected of men, regarded as having a negative impact on men and society as a whole. And certainly some men do act negatively and violently. I don't suppose anyone would deny that. But doesn't small segments of every population group act in negative ways that harms themselves and others around them? But I'm not sure we could get away with coining a phrase such as toxic femininity or toxic African Americanism. But why is that? Why does one segment of our population get to be singled out for undesirable actions of a small subset of its group, while other segments of our population get a complete pass for their behaviors that are certainly as detrimental to themselves and our culture at large as any behavior that males display? The answer is that it's safe. Basically, males, particularly males classified as Caucasians, are easy targets. They are specifically excluded from any sort of victim group unless, of course, they are gay or decide to spontaneously change their gender. Then they mysteriously and immediately become victims of the same group they previously identified as. And how is it that males are being singled out anyway? I thought the left said there was no such thing as genders, and if there are, and a biological female decides to identify as a male, will she or he now be characterized as toxically masculine if they act in some traditional male way? It's just all very confusing to someone who is as well grounded with old-fashioned common sense as myself. Am I toxically masculine? I did some soul searching before committing this particular video to tape. I would fight and die for the people that I love. I have worked and continue to work in a very physically demanding job that leaves me incredibly tired at times, with hands that are all scarred up. I started working at about 14 years old, and at 62, I'm still working to support various parts of my family. I've often worked 2 jobs to make ends meet throughout my life. I stand up for what I believe in, and I do that without shame or guilt. I am the patriarch of my family, but not because I appointed myself as such, but because my family recognizes me as the one they can reliably go to for help when they have problems or issues that need resolving. I do provide an important father figure to my children, grandchildren, even friends of my children who didn't have a father figure growing up. Now, if all those things are indicators that I am toxically masculine, then I guess I plead guilty to the label they have inscribed me with, and proudly so I might add. So, you have to answer the question as to why this line of reasoning is put into play that causes one group of people to ascribe to another group of people unseemly characteristics such as toxic masculinity. Well, it's very simple, folks. It is the same reason that the left of this country does everything. It's a means to divide people. Divided people do not stand together against a common oppressor, government, because they're too busy fighting among themselves. If you can make one group of people believe they are victims and then subsequently point out another group of people who are responsible for their victimhood, then they will fight your fight for you without you having to get involved or take responsibility for the ensuing craziness. It has the added benefit of taking your fractured attention off the destructive things people in government are doing to our nation all the time. Here's what I believe. We are men and women. Both have valuable attributes given to us by God or by nature if you do not believe in God. We are structured this way biologically to tend to the tasks which we were naturally assigned to us. Men cannot have children. Women were assigned this important task. They were given the compassion and patience to take care of and raise their children in a loving environment. Men were assigned to protect and provide for their families with all the courage and strength they can muster. Now, regardless of who is bringing in the paycheck, you cannot take away what has been biologically assigned. I will go a step further. I am a Christian man. In Christianity, the man is supposed to be the authority in the house, if of course he's doing his job. Now, this particular belief rubs feminists the wrong way, and a lot of other females too sometimes. For them, it is proof that toxic masculinity exists because for them this amounts to male domination over women. But while the man is given authority over the house, he is only to use his authority to ensure what is best for his family, not for himself. He becomes the last priority in the house, and in doing so actually becomes a servant to the family. This is a common theme in Christianity. You lose something to gain something. Far more important, if you want to gain your immortal soul, you must lose your old connections to the flesh. If you want to be first, you have to be last. And in this case, if you want to be the leader of the family, you must serve the family unselfishly and without expecting reward. You know, when I became a debt contractor more than 20 years ago, I formed my small company and I was looking for a catchy name for it. There was this small donut shop where I would frequent back in those days to get some coffee before I would start the day. There was a group of regulars that sat in a circle around the counter. So I approached them one day and I said, I'm looking for a name for my debt company and I don't want any inputs from men. I just want women to give me names. I did this because even at the time I had already come to recognize and realize that women make 90% of the decisions about the home. By the way, more than 20 years later, I'm even more convinced of that truism. One of the ladies gave me a name and it was Deck the House. To this day, women always like that name. Now my point to all this is that just like the song It's a Man's World by Etta James, men may build the world, but they do it for women. Women are already in charge. It's just the feminists who haven't come to realize that this little fact. And they want to take away the essential part of men that compels them to build and to create an environment that we all enjoy, to include women. Since my foray into construction, I have yet to see a woman regularly working in one of the trades, and it's not because they wouldn't be hired. The reason is twofold. The first is that women by their very nature have no interest in doing that kind of physical labor. The second is that in most cases they would have a difficult time being able to physically perform those jobs. Quite frankly, I'm surprised at times that I'm able to physically do some of the things my job requires of me. The entire concept of a toxic masculinity is one that cannot be specifically defined and relies totally on subjective evaluations, which is how the left of this country gets people on board. Their concepts do not require verifiable data sets, objectivity, or logic-based thought processes. It's all about how you feel in the general sense of the word. Finally, folks, attempting to rid society of masculinity is to get rid of an extraordinarily important component of our society. Men can be masculine and manly without being macho, just as women can be feminine without being prissy or demanding. Our roles are vitally important. The very part of men that feminists want to cut out from men's DNAs is the very part that holds society together. Every significant statistic that relates to inner city youth issues all have a missing father figure component to blame for most of their woes. To destroy all the positives related to solid male figures is to take part in the dismantlement of our society. And if most women were honest with themselves, to include feminists, they are not attracted to emasculated men. They want men generally to display masculine traits, just as surely as most men are attracted to women who display generally feminine traits. There are two parts that make a healthy whole. You know, I don't think women would want to trade places with us anyway. After all, men commit suicide at a significantly higher rate than women. Men live shorter lifespans than women. Men internalize everything that ails them and just keep it bundled up inside for the most part, and not just because they're taught to do so by society. Women graduate college at significantly higher rates than men. Men's lives are not a smorgasbord where you can pick and choose what you think that you want. If feminists want to trade lives with men because they think it is so good, then they need to take it all, not just the things that they want. So what is it exactly do feminists, what do they want? But who knows? But in the end analysis, I have to say that I'm proud to be the man that I was made to be. I have no desire to be different, and quite honestly, no one has the right to force someone else to be different than who they are. And they certainly don't have the right to teach young boys to be ashamed of who they are. You would think people who believe in our ability to change genders and respect that change would confer that same respect to those of us who are already satisfied with who we are. But of course they can't, because they are wholly incapable of seeing their own flaws, their own imperfections, and finally their own inner demons. Well, that's it, folks. Time to move on to the next topic of conversation. You have been listening to the Patriot Preacher. If you've enjoyed our little conversation about the nonsensical topic of toxic masculinity, please take the time to make comments below or hit that little subscribe button to the bottom right. And until next time, I wish you all the very best that life has to offer. Goodbye, and God bless you all.